And Sabine, we heard from earlier, joined the University of Nottingham back in 2006 and has been involved right since before those students, first students joined. I'd like to focus, if I may, on Georgina, who we're going to hear from now, though, who qualified from University of Liverpool in 2016 and worked as a small animal vet in first opinion practice for 2 years and discovered her love of teaching, helping vet students and owners in practice. I can absolutely empathise with that, Georgina. You went on to undertake the postgraduate certificate in veterinary education at University of Nottingham. Now working as a teacher at the university with a particular interest in supporting student wellbeing and preparing students for the potential challenges that they may face in clinical work. Thank you ever so much, Georgina. I'd like to hand across to you.
Thank you, James. What a warm welcome. Super. So thank you for joining me on this talk. As brilliantly introduced by James, my name is Georgina, and also thanks to Sabine for contributing to this whole idea. So the theme of this talk today is using a co-created interactive game to engage students with mental health awareness. And let's get started. If I can see the little arrows. Oh, here we go. So hopefully the content of this presentation can be nicely summarised in these 2 thought bubbles. So it's been in the last 2 years or so that mental health teaching at the University of Nottingham has really developed, and we're constantly trying to evolve how we can actually share the importance of this subject with our students. We're fortunate that recently we've had a bit of a curriculum overhaul, and the mental health sort of awareness teachers were allocated 24 hours across 6 weeks to deliver material to 150 first-year veterinary students. So it was initially myself and colleague Sabine who thought, how can we actually engage students in mental health awareness at the university? To which the answer was, in that little purple thought bubble, what about a board game? So initially, we knew that we wanted the board game to complement other teaching, which Sabine has covered in talks earlier this morning. And so we started with kind of an initial planning stage and a vision of what we wanted this game to look like. We knew that we wanted it to be a group activity, so there was time for lots of discussion. We wanted a physical board game, try and imagine sort of snakes and ladders. We knew we wanted different scenarios where students could kind of discuss what the outcome of that scenario could be, and also think about different support mechanisms available to them. We wanted there to be some discussion points, some prompts to get students talking. We wanted there to be physical counters as well for them to actually have something tactile to play with. And we also wanted some crisis scenarios with them. And the idea was that this material would run for the very first time in March 2020. Now, of course, as we all know, we had a bit of a different March 2020, and we were faced with the pandemic. And for educators everywhere, our initial vision had to rapidly change. So the university actually closed in March due to COVID, and the timing of our teaching was scheduled for the end of that month. So we had to promptly change everything to suit online delivery. So that meant no physical board game in front of a group of students. It meant no physical tactile coins. And it also meant, as you can see from my pictures, pets invading our screens from our new work from home lifestyle. We did manage to adapt the format, and instead we used an open source platform called Open Labyrinth to actually run those scenarios. We recruited some student facilitators, and what they did is they actually shared the game over their screen, over Teams, with their small group. So those are the things we weren't able to have due to COVID. So when we actually decided how we're going to design this game, we started with an initial framework, and we knew we wanted this game to follow the progression of a vet student. We hoped that this would actually help with relatability, and that students might be able to sort of follow along and see familiarities with their day-to-day life. We were lucky enough that we had interested students help us trial the game and also help us develop scenarios that felt relevant to them, which we thought was very important. University students have a certain knack for describing the terror of turning up to the wrong lecture theatre, or actually describing the amazement they felt on EMS, perhaps watching a lamb being born. And so it was these stories that we knew we wanted to use to inspire our scenarios for the students to have a go at. From there on, we had a trial version of the game, and we've now actually been able to run it for 3 different cohorts of students. We collect feedback from the students every time, and as well from our facilitators. And it's from there that we've been able to make adaptations and improve our game as we go. So why use student co-creation? So we were very lucky that we had 21 students from years 1 to 5 who have an interest in mental health awareness and also peer coaching, and it was them who helped us. We wanted to kind of use their relevance and also their own stories to help develop the game. And they were also able to provide us with anecdotal feedback as they sort of had a go, which let us know what would be successful or not successful. Ooh, I've lost my little arrow. Let me just see if I can find that again. Oh, here we go, sorry. And we've got some quotes from them there in the orange and pink text boxes. So the orange one says, "Thank you for organising today's session. I thought it was fantastic. I'm more than happy to help a bit more with the board game." And also one of them said they're interested in helping out further because they're trying to build somewhat of an academic CV. So we hope it was useful for our students as well, being part of the co-creation process. So continuing on with our theme of student helpers, we also had students as peer facilitators. So what that meant is one older student, not necessarily older in terms of age, but older in terms of further through the course, were facilitating the small groups of 5 to 6 students online, and they were guiding them through the game. This provided a nice, safe environment because students didn't need to worry about staff being present in the call with them. Student facilitators can sometimes be more relatable and also approachable than staff, and it's them who have all of those useful tips and tricks for those challenges that we face in university life. There's also a nice opportunity for them to get to meet each other, and it's that opportunity, isn't it, to ask those important questions such as, how should I tackle this assessment? Or probably more importantly, where should we go out first in Nottingham once lockdown is lifted? So up till now, I've sort of talked about how we developed the game, and this slide helps summarize what actually happened within the game. So starting at the 2 o'clock position on this diagram, we have fictitious student. So we purposefully designed the game to follow a student through their first year at vet school. This student didn't have a stated gender, and they had a gender neutral name. We hoped that by following a character, rather than questions that are actually based on an individual player, e.g. the questions were phrased, Alex attended a practical, rather than you attended a practical, it would help give students a little bit of distance from obviously these different experiences that we were showing them. And we thought it might be easier to discuss a fictitious character rather than actually discuss things happening to yourself. At the 5 o'clock position on the diagram, we're revisiting scenarios. So students picked up a scenario at each turn, and the scenario either had a positive or a negative experience for the student character. This would either add stress or remove stress from their stress buckets. And you can see we've got the little green circle there says -1 stress point, or the red square said +1 stress point. So they were instructed on what to do. At the 7 o'clock and the 12 o'clock position, we have crisis points and also discussion points throughout, which relate to the scenarios given to the students with the aim of getting the students talking about what advice they might give a friend in a similar circumstance. At the nearly 9 o'clock position, the advantages of using the Open Labyrinth program we use to actually play the game come into full effect. So the platform has the option to have several outcomes to one scenario. So we were able to give students choices of what they might want their character to do. So this created the opportunity for more discussion, as students were required to actually discuss and decide as a group which direction to take the game in. And finally, in the top left corner of the screen, we have a little purple box, which is our wellbeing toolbox. So this concept has some suggested wellbeing strategies for students that they could allocate to their student character and help them improve their wellbeing. Things such as having a healthy sleep hygiene routine, maybe go for a run, hang out with friends, watch a movie, etc. And it also encouraged students to create their own strategies for their character, all with the hope of depleting the stress levels. Just a reminder or an introduction to the stress bucket if it's not something you've come across before. The ongoing essence of this game was to monitor the stress bucket of the student character. So the concept of the stress bucket is that we all have buckets or containers of different sizes, and everyday experiences can change the level of stress we are carrying around with us. So negative experiences fill up our bucket, as do maladaptive coping strategies, and it's positive experiences that help reduce our stress, and that's what those taps represent along the bottom of the bucket. So hopefully the idea is the more taps we have, the more tools we have at our disposal to try and control how we're feeling. We obviously don't know what stresses everybody is experiencing at any one time, and we can't underestimate as well any residual fluid we might have sitting at the bottom of our bucket. So we ask students to consider the concept of the stress bucket and how various scenarios might affect the level within. So here we have an example of a scenario that students experienced in the game. So here in this scenario, we have our student character who has learned that they haven't bought nor budgeted for some of the necessary textbooks that they might require at vet school. So this understandably adds some stress to the bucket, and students then have to decide what they're going to get their student character to do. And those options varied from sharing books with a friend, visiting the library, looking for secondhand editions, etc. Here's an example of our wellbeing toolbox. So this is where we explain short-term wellbeing tools that can help you manage stress in the interim period, and also long-term management strategies, which could include implementing a healthy eating plan, starting a new hobby, or joining a sports club. We try to encourage students to encourage what might already be in their wellbeing toolbox and what is it they currently do to help their wellbeing. So now we move on to the key part. You found out how it was created, but what did the students actually think? So in general, we had very positive feedback, with 65 out of 88 of the initial comments enjoying the game. Students felt that discussions around the important topics were natural, and it also helped them learn about the support services available to them, both at the vet school, at the university, and also external resources. If you follow along now the blue hexagons, the scenarios felt relevant to students, and it helped them reflect and consider how they might cope in those situations. And by implementing the wellbeing toolbox, it also helped to reduce stigma around how important it is that we look after ourselves. These pink shapes along the bottom, they show us some of the negative comments, I suppose, that the students fed back to us, or the challenges that we faced, which were that students would have preferred the session to be face-to-face rather than online. Some of them thought it was too long, and one reported that by calling it a game, are we making it unrealistic to everyday life? We also asked our student facilitators to provide us with some feedback. And in general, again, it was quite nice and positive. They felt that discussion levels varied between groups, and unfortunately, at times, discussion might have been limited. They commented that the facilitation was simple to do. It was a good way to check in with the group, and they found it a rewarding experience to be part of. Yes, thank you, James. I've just seen your comments. I shall hurry up. And they also thought the stress bucket was easy to apply. So finally, now what do we do with this information? So as COVID restrictions ease and as the school starts to move back to face-to-face teaching, the game can finally be delivered as it was initially imagined. We've learned quite a lot from our remote experiences, but the main element of the game that was very useful were the discussion opportunities. So it's being able to think about scenarios and thinking about how you might support a friend that was most useful. We will, as you can see at the bottom there, what we're going to do next, we're hoping to continue playing it in small groups, and we've also already helped some other courses and universities adapt it. Thank you very much. I will finish there. Sorry, James.
Not at all, Georgina. Thank you ever so much.